Good evening, everybody, and thanks for attending our town hall meeting on the return to school. We are here tonight to do question and answers and do a presentation on the plan to return to school. We have a slideshow on the return to school, and we have a frequently asked questions presentation, and we will open the format up to everybody in the audience to participate and ask questions. We will take notes on those questions and try to get answers put back up. If we don't answer them today, try and get them put in the frequently asked questions box and make sure we try and answer everybody's questions or address concerns that they may have as far as returning to school. I am Amy Todd. I'm not sure if everybody knows that Dr. Collette has resigned, and I am the temporary interim superintendent until the district replaces Dr. Collette. And so far, we are working on this plan, and I am going to turn it over. I believe Mrs. Fleck is our first presenter for the return to school presentation.
If I could just interrupt one second.
Oh, go ahead.
There are going to be a lot of participants on the meeting today, so everybody in the audience, if you could be aware and be respectful of everybody, and please mute your microphone until it is your turn to speak in the question and answer session, and then I'll go over some format regulations there before we get started. So, Mrs. Fleck, please continue. Thank you.
Good evening. This is Cheryl Fleck, principal at Claysville Elementary School. I first want to thank all the members of the Return to School Committee. We had several members of our staff, community, and parents that have been working very hard on this draft of a plan. And we've been meeting since May 18th and continue to meet on a weekly basis to plan for the reopening of school. The learning options, if we could. I'll wait from Mr. Wilson. There we go. Next one, perfect. During the red phase, the schools will remain closed for in-person instruction, and all instruction must be provided via remote learning, whether using digital or non-digital platforms. Provisions for student services such as school meal programs should continue, and large gatherings are prohibited. During the yellow phase and the green phase, which obviously we are in the green phase now, schools may provide in-person instruction after developing a written health and safety plan to be approved by the local school board and posted on the school district's website. The Department of Education gave us 4 options for reopening. The first option was a total reopen. The second was a scaffolded reopen, where some grades may come in person, where other grades may have distance learning. The third was a blended opening, which is a balance of in-person and remote learning. And the fourth was a total remote learning option. So at this point, we are looking at a blended opening. And the first option for that blended opening would be a hybrid of in-classroom learning and remote learning. The in-classroom learning would be 2 days per week in 2 separate groups of students. A blue group would be Mondays and Tuesdays, and a gold group would be Thursdays and Fridays, with a Wednesday in between for remote learning. This 2-day-a-week learning option would help us to return to school safely. We would consider students in the same household to be in the same group. It would promote our social distancing practices of 6 feet. It would support time to teach protocols and procedures, and would provide additional opportunities in the middle of the week for cleaning in between groups. Simultaneously to this hybrid model of in-classroom and remote learning, McGuffey would offer a full 5-day-a-week cyber option for all of our students. And we are currently looking at 2 programs right now to contract for that particular cyber option. So that will be available to any parent that may not be comfortable sending their child back to school, even in a blended learning environment. Option B wait till we. Option B is very similar to option A in that the students would attend 3 days a week. The blue group would be Mondays, Tuesdays, gold group Thursday, Friday, but students would attend on alternating Wednesdays. And this would, again, allow for our safe return. We would consider students in the same household, promote the social distancing practices, support the time to teach those protocols and procedures, but they would get an additional day of in-person instruction bi-weekly. If we are in the red phase or have a confirmed case of COVID, we would automatically move to remote learning, where all students and teachers would shift to a remote learning for the duration of the red phase or for the confirmed case until we are given clearance to reopen. And I know some people asked, what would that look like as far as closing if we had a case at Claysville, for example, or a case at the high school, would the whole district shut down? And we would definitely look at that on a case-by-case basis. Again, we would continue to offer the McGuffey cyber option, and that would continue. Concerns regarding full opening of school. We did consider a full reopening. However, social distancing would be reduced to 3 feet or less during the school day and on district transportation. We would not be able to provide that 6 feet of distancing for mask wearing breaks in the classrooms. Additional staffing and classroom spaces would be required to maintain that 6 feet of social distancing. We would be required to make several changes to our schedules with arrival, dismissal, and staff reporting times, and there would be an increased likelihood of exposure. I'm going to pass this over to the safety section.
Thank you, Ms. Fleck. This is Mr. Bonus. I'm Principal McGuffey High School. I want to go over the work that was completed by members of the safety committee. The members of the safety committee was a team of teachers and faculty, teachers, staff, and administrators from all buildings in the district, including our school nurses and including Mr. McKee, who's our Director of Buildings and Grounds. And our goal in this process was to develop a flexible and sustainable plan that could provide a safe reopening to our schools while protecting the health and safety of our students, our families, our employees, and our community. And the goal of this, in a simple statement, is to open our schools for the beginning of the 2020-21 school year and have them remain open for the duration. So we've met 9 times since mid-May and have gone over all the guidance being provided by the Pennsylvania Department of Health and the Pennsylvania Department of Education. And I'm going to go over some of the ideas that were made by this committee in terms of implementation and the rationale for the selection of the blended model as a way to open schools for this school year. If you take a look at anything going on in our society right now, whether you're walking into a post office, whether you're walking into a business, a restaurant, whatever it may be, we basically have 3 ways in which to combat the spread of the COVID-19 virus, and that includes social distancing, washing our hands and keeping your hands sanitized, and the covering and implementation of face coverings. Those are the 3 best practices that we've come up with to date to combat the spread of this virus. So obviously our safety plan revolved around what do those 3 strategies look like when you implement them into the school day at Claysville Elementary, Joe Walker, McGuffey Middle School, and McGuffey High School. So I'll go over some of the things in this slide about how basically to incorporate those concepts into our school practice and school day. Obviously, social distancing of 6 feet. is going to be a priority in perhaps our strongest defense about limiting the spread here at our schools. By having half the students here at a time, it gives us the ability in our classrooms to socially distance students to an acceptable framework, and therefore decreasing the risk. Limiting the gatherings of large groups. Seating students facing the same direction, which means that a person is facing the back of another person's head, as opposed to face, where the spread could more easily take place. One of the ways to incorporate social distancing in our transitions throughout the building would be to have clear directional signs and pathways marked on the floor, as well as spacing designations comparable to what you'll see in a Giant Eagle or a grocery store, or really any large place that people gather. We would stagger transition times and stagger the students whenever they transition in between classes, particularly at the secondary level. We don't see it as being a major element of eating into instructional time, but it would there would be a few minutes added to that bell schedule to allow for the distancing to be maintained whenever students transition throughout our hallways in our complex. And obviously, for physical exercise, gym classes, those types of things where there's physical activity, we would prioritize the use of outdoors for that, where students could even be spaced beyond 6 feet, obviously with the outside, and stagger locker room usage to allow for a safe changing of clothes, or whether even if that's going to be implemented as part of what they're going to do in physical education this year, at least to start. In the classroom environment, we would limit the sharing of physical materials and resources. We would clean lab equipment, but by limiting the sharing of physical materials and resources, I mean that sometimes students would rely on textbooks and things like that, or common items passed out in the classroom or brought into the classroom.
Other emails, you probably need to redo them.
What we would do is we would obviously prioritize the use of digital content, being that we are a district that has embraced the one-to-one, and I believe we will have resources that will enable every student in the district to have a Chromebook that they could use. So using the Chromebook and the digital framework for instruction and materials would be a priority to limit the spread once again, and that common touching of physical equipment. Regularly cleaning lab equipment, physical education equipment, and shop machines after their use. Distribution of hand sanitizer stations throughout the classroom, office, and common spaces found throughout the school. Posting of appropriate and age-appropriate signage that really communicates to the students, obviously different signage for the elementary than it would be for the secondary, about the importance of social distancing, hand washing, face coverings, et cetera, et cetera. Clearly labeling student materials to limit the exposure and sort of the misidentification of student belongings. And here's the one I think that is perhaps the biggest, and something that I think the public expects us to be good at, and that is to educate students and staff about the importance of these measures and the true threat to the health and safety that this virus is. And that includes not only coming from people from within the schools, our health professionals in the schools, but also outside resources such as through the Washington Health System, UPMC, bringing in those experts to really drive home that message to the students that this is important and it's helping us to stay open. And please work with us to make sure that you integrate these practices into your daily routine in school. I've seen these practices in place with our athletic plan that's currently in place. Those of you who may know that we are our athletic teams for fall sports and even some of the winter sports are having summer workouts, and we have a very detailed plan about how we're protecting students whenever they engage in these outside activities. And the students know that and the coaches know for that matter, and I think Mr. Dalton has done a good job of communicating that with our coaches. And our coaches have really taken ownership of that process because they know that's allowing that to continue, and that it's keeping them safe, and doing those good practices is allowing the students to really enjoy that. There was 5 or 6 teams up here today. The boys and girls soccer team worked out this morning. Girls basketball was in, volleyball was in, and football was in. So I'm sorry, that was 5 teams that were here on our site doing these summer workouts today. So the kids know they really want to keep this going. They're really enjoying the ability to get together in these activities that are so important to student life up here. And we look to bring all of our athletics and our activities along the same lines to make sure that they can happen. The last segment is our face coverings and masks. They would be required for all students and staff. There are specific exemptions that apply to that will be covered by Mr. Wolf. And we expect further guidance from the Pennsylvania Department of Health and the Pennsylvania Department of Education as conditions change and as we approach the beginning of the school year. We're basically in mid-July, and I don't know that anybody knows exactly the degree or the circumstance in which we will begin school, the current circumstances. We're hopeful that we can start with this blended model, begin the school year, work to become a full model, and whereas we bring everybody back 5 days a week. But we feel that starting with the blended model and then giving the board the ability to set up criteria in which they would recall a full exercise of school and pull everybody back and resume a 5-day regimen for all students on a month-by-month basis. This is a flexible plan. It's just meant to get us started, and it's a half a step before we go to a full step. And I know that there's talk of other districts out there that are starting full, or at least a few weeks ago were starting full, and now are reconsidering that. Or we also looked at it, if you start full and then try to implement a blended model and sort of scale back once you've started full, that would be much more disruptive than starting in a blended model and then advancing forward. So we expect things to change and this plan to change as conditions change. It's made to be flexible, and that's where we're at with the safety considerations. Now, Mr. Wolf's going to talk a little bit more about face coverings and masks.
Thank you, Mr. Bonus. And again, my name is Matt Wolf. I'm the assistant principal at Claysville Elementary. Just like Mr. Bonus alluded to, just the precautions that we're trying to implement to minimize the spread of COVID-19 with the 3 areas that he just mentioned. One of them being the face coverings. As a safety committee, we talked and discussed this at length. But also we are guided by the Pennsylvania Department of Health mandate with the face coverings that the state just came out. So this helped us drive forward of what we need to do as a school. And so a few of the things that we want to cover are universal face coverings apply to children and adults while in school. And as of now, yes, this order does apply to all individuals while in school entities, including public K-12 schools. For the safety of students and staff and families, and to avoid community spread of the COVID-19, students and staff are considered to be members of the public who are congregating in indoor locations. And as such, they are to be required to adhere to this order. This order remains into effect until further notice. Now, a mask, it helps minimize the spread of the virus. And so with that, there are certain circumstances that students are permitted to remove their face coverings according to the mandate. Schools may allow students to remove these face coverings if students are 6 feet apart and eating or drinking. If they're seated at desks or assigned workspaces that are at least 6 feet apart, or engaged in activities 6 feet apart. And I think that that is one of the biggest things about this blended version or blended model that we are proposing, is this gives an opportunity to take off the masks at certain points throughout the day. There are certain exceptions, just like Mr. Bonus mentioned earlier. Students with disabilities or medical conditions, any students who cannot wear a mask or face shield due to medical conditions, including those of respiratory issues and impede breathing, they are not required to wear a mask. And at this time, students do not need to provide documentation for this exemption. We are still looking for the state to give us more guidance on this for this mandate. And we are working as a team to come up with solutions for to provide alternate face coverings or alternate ways to minimize the spread for students and staff. So that is, and again, just like Mr. Bonus and the safety committee talked about, is very important that we only have so many certain things to help us minimize this as we bring kids back. And with the social distancing, cleaning of the classrooms, and also face masks, those are the tools that we have to help minimize the spread and to keep everyone in the community, in the school, and the staff safe as we move forward to reopening our schools. And we want to keep those schools open as long, and we don't want to go back and forth and take a half step back, just like Mr. Bonus said. We want to continue to move forward. So the next presentation, or the next section, would be transportation, foods, and operations. I'm going to pass it over to Mr. McKee.
Thank you, Matt. Good evening, everybody. Craig McKee, Supervisor of Buildings and Grounds. On the Transportation, Food Service, and Operations Committee. And tonight I'll be speaking a little bit about the operations in the food service areas. So we start with screening and protocols, self-health checks, and really that starts at home. When you get up in the morning, not just for students, but also for staff and anybody that's going to visit the school. We want you to stay home if you're sick. The nurses have come up with a basic questionnaire for the students and staff to fill out. And of course, we all know that the success of a lot of this requires honesty from everybody. How are you feeling today in an honest fashion? I know myself, sometimes I don't really feel good, but I'll say I feel okay because I think I have things that need to get done. So when we say self-health checks, we really need that to be done at home. We prefer, if you're not feeling well, stay home. Same with temperature checks. If you can check your temperature at home, saves us from having to do it here. Elevated temperature, we've all heard a lot about it. It's one of the telltale signs. Isolation rooms. Now, because of the ease with which this virus spreads, we've created isolation rooms in the nurses' suites of all 3 of our buildings. And those rooms are for anybody with an elevated temperature. Now, we have to keep in mind that, a person can have an elevated temperature from, you could have COVID, you could have an ear infection, you could have, any number of things that will elevate your temperature. Our nurses, they don't have the means here to test and say, well, this is COVID, this is not COVID. So our procedure will be, once you have that elevated temperature, you cross that threshold, that student or person that needs a ride, they'll go to the isolation room, wait for someone to pick them up, take them home. The recommendation then will, of course, be to get checked out by your doctor. We will limit non-essential visitors and meetings. We have plans for using the vestibules in the buildings. If you're just dropping something off, there's really no need to come inside and have more contact with more people. We can do a lot of those things, sort of like the touchless drive-through kind of thing. trainings for staff, students, and visitors. And of course, that training is all the things that can contribute to spreading of the virus or the prevention of spreading of the virus. Follow travel restriction guidelines. I think we're all aware lately that there's a list of states now that the governor has come out and said if you're going to these states, when you come back, you need to self-quarantine. Well, again, that goes back to, are we telling the truth about where we were, and are we taking this seriously? Are we going to self-quarantine so that we don't take a chance on spreading that to our loved ones or our friends or other people in the community? Cleaning and sanitizing, we've always used EPA registered disinfectant. Our disinfectant is effective against COVID-19. We will continue to emphasize high touch areas. We're looking at increasing our touch-free restroom cleaning. Now, that doesn't really mean touch-free. What it means is there are some pieces of equipment out there. They're basically self-contained pressure washers that allow us to come in and really, put a good wash and rinse on the restrooms every night. We still have to wipe the sinks. We still have to swab the commodes and those sort of things. But they do allow us to do that in a more thorough fashion and in a more efficient manner so that we have more time to spend in the other areas of the building. And of course, supplies will be available for staff. Examples would be in your chem labs or your phys ed groups and so on, where they will have no choice, but some materials will have to be shared, but they'll also have to be cleaned. So we'll make those available to the staff. As far as our physical plant, increasing air circulation, whether it be through opening windows, increase outdoor air damper set points, our heating and cooling units all have the ability to bring in additional fresh air. So most of those are computer controlled, and we've already gone through and made adjustments to those. The ones that are not, we'll make mechanical adjustments to those. Keep an eye on them. Touch-free water stations. And what that's referring to is we will be converting water fountains in every building to filling stations. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the bottle filling station. They will no longer be able to get a drink by, using the bubbler and, bending down. They'll need to bring their water bottle to fill that. And of course, as Mr. Bonus has spoken on signage, desks in the same direction. Now, in the operations, we went around and we physically measured every classroom in the district, and we gave the principals those dimensions and the numbers of desks that would fit in those rooms, maintaining that 6-foot seating to help them, plan their days. And of course, we have the use of outdoor and large group spaces, of course, for, gym class and so on. And finally, on operations, the use of facilities in red and yellow, no use by outside groups. And that is, of course, not necessarily, not our sanctioned teams and after school groups, but those groups that aren't directly affiliated with the district. And on the green, we're going case by case on the limited use by those groups. A lot of that will depend on the days of the week they want to use the facilities and what type of cleaning load that puts on the staff that will be concentrating on, the rest of our buildings so that we can be safe for class. Now I'll move to food service a little bit. Distribution of food. The lunch line set up for social distancing and directional markings for one-way flow. Joe Walker and Claysville, they're already set up for one-way flow. And of course, the social distancing is we'll just have the kids stand further apart as they go to get their lunch. Now they have a pin pad for putting in their student ID. We're looking at barcode readers and new cards for them so that they don't have to actually touch that keypad. They can just scan that barcode. Of course, we'll reinforce proper hand hygiene and the washing and sanitizing your hands prior to lunch. And the school distributed meals, whether you're going in line, you'll either have that meal served to you or everything will be like a prepackaged item. And when we say prepackaged, it doesn't necessarily mean, sealed from like a sealed muffin, breakfast muffin. It could be like an orange that's wrapped in saran wrap so that no one's bare hands have touched it. And of course, there's no buffet style food. So up here at the high school, where you have a la carte items, that serving area would have a defined counterclockwise flow to it. We'll still allow the kids to have their choices of lunches, whether it's a gourmet bar, the pizza, your mainline food. The thing that they won't be able to do is that like the salad bar and so on. So we really expect very few changes to the way that the students and staff get their food. Seating, we're looking at just using individual desks for the seating so that we can maintain that social distancing. Of course, we've gone over the mask thing. Again, hand hygiene when they're finished eating. The meals brought from home, ideally, we would like to see, traditional brown bag lunches. When the kids are done, whatever's in there can be thrown away. What we're basically trying to do is limit stops to lockers and so on. The less things that, less disruptions to social distancing and so on that we have. And I know it seems like a minor thing, but can add up, and we're trying to piece this all together so that we can be basically as safe as we can. But food, again, with some practical guidelines, I don't think there will be a whole lot of difference. I don't think that the students will see a lot of difference this year to last year. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Mr. Wilson for transportation.
Hey, before we jump into Mr. Wilson, can I just touch base? I know that this is an abbreviated version of our presentation from last Thursday, and I just wanted to clarify some of the exceptions of the face covering requirements. And if I might, and I know that you touched base on that as well. I just when I was presenting within the safety. I just mentioned the medical conditions and just touched upon that, but I just wanted to go through, and I know there were some concerns about what all are the conditions. We went over them on Thursday, and I just wanted to reiterate that before we move on. So the following are exceptions to the face covering requirement. And so here are the face cover requirements for individuals for the exceptions. Individuals who cannot wear a mask due to medical conditions, including those with respiratory issues that impede breathing, mental health condition, or disability. Individuals for whom wearing a mask while working would create an unsafe condition in which to operate equipment or execute a task as determined by local, state, or federal regulators or workplace safety guidelines. Individuals who would be unable to remove a mask without assistance. And individuals who are under 2 years of age, individuals who are communicating or seeking to communicate with someone who is hearing impaired or has another disability where the ability to see the mouth is essential for communication. And at that point, we would have maybe a face shield to replace that. I just wanted to go over, I appreciate but I wanted to make sure that was clear. And I know that brought up some questions. So sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. My name is Mike Wilson. I'm the Director of Transportation and Technology for McGuffey School District. Just wanted to bring to light a few things, a few considerations that we were looking at when we were developing a plan for transportation with the safety in mind of everybody involved. So initially, we were looking at some guidelines that were put out by the Pennsylvania Department of Education, as well as CDC regulations and guidelines. And we were looking at capacities of buses and how many students we would be able to transport on any given day. The initial guidance that came back from those organizations was essentially you can have one student every other seat on a school bus, which takes the total capacity of school bus to a grand total of 12 students. In there was, the guidelines allowed for some discretion. So if we look at sitting students, one student per seat, that takes the total capacity of a student bus up to 24 students. And then through an analysis of last year's runs and total enrollment for this year, if we set siblings together and still maintained the so one student per seat and then sit siblings together, we would average roughly about 35 students per school bus based on current enrollments. So that was our recommendation when we're talking about capacity and what that looks like for transportation. And if you compare that to the number of students in our total enrollment, that equates to essentially just over half the students that we would be able to transport on any given day if we had one student per seat and siblings would sit together for a maximum of 2 per seat. So just so everybody is aware, those are kind of the numbers that we were looking at. Also within the plan, we were looking at considerations when we look at boarding and exiting of school buses. Obviously, I talked a little bit about capacities. But for the safety of everybody involved in transportation, hand washing and hand sanitizing was a critical component of this. So we're looking at obtaining hand sanitizer for drivers and students. We're looking at the possibility of mounting hand sanitizer stations on the school buses, but currently Department of Transportation regulations do not allow you to modify the school bus in any way to do so. So there is an inquiry into the Department of Transportation to allow us to do that. And we've talked a little bit about it with all of our contractors, and they're working right along with us to maintain or to develop these plans. Some protocols we looked at for social distancing and to try and mitigate some of the cross contamination is when you talk about loading a school bus or unloading a school bus, if you design a flow with that in mind, when the first student is picked up in the morning, they go to the back of the bus. Second student goes just in front of them. That kind of flow would reduce the instances of cross-contamination possibly, and then the reverse in the afternoon or when unloading is concerned. Transporting to and from school, drivers and students are going to be required to wear masks within the guidelines and regulations put forward that Mr. Wolf was talking about earlier. And obviously, once again, spaced seating as much as possible and practical on each of those runs. Other safeguards that we considered, the cleanliness and the disinfecting of frequently touched surfaces on a school bus. Clearly, the rails on the loading and unloading on the steps is a concern. Those will be frequently disinfected, as well as when I are collaborating with the school bus companies, we're also talking about at least a minimum of a daily cleaning of the entire school bus, and each company is working on their own protocols and when it's concerned with how to do that on a daily basis. There are some processes that are available. Hello? So there are some processes that are available that would extend the length. If you are a participant in the meeting, if you could mute your microphone until the presentation is completed, and then we'll have time. So those were just some considerations when we were talking about transportation
I don't know.
40.
as we move forward. I'm going to turn the
No, I think that's enough.
presentation over to
40 there.
one more. Curriculum and instruction.
Okay, here we go.
Listen to that one.
Yep. I can't miss a thing. I will.
After it's been turned off.
I think you're on mute. I think this service is on mute.
Sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Wilson. And I'm sorry about that if I didn't have the microphone. So one thing is a curriculum instruction, we were looking at blended learning. And it was really important as a committee that we look at, and this is just something new that we are embarking on. And so we felt it was vital to develop professional development and to provide resources for our staff and families to implement remote learning and blended learning. So not only in school, but also when they go when they're at home for the remote. We want also, we're looking at utilizing the same platform across the district and be consistent with that with the Google Classroom and have every classroom look similar. So as a parent, you go in and you can see the same thing. If you have a third grader or an eighth grader, the Google Classroom will look the same. And I think that's very important that we want to move forward, that we're all the same and have consistency across the board. As we move into, as we looked into providing a full cyber learning, we are exploring partnerships with the IU1, the Fusion Cyber Program, and another equivalent option that we're looking in, and we're trying to get that out as quickly as we can. But we want to do our due diligence on investigating and researching different models that what the best fit for us. And I think that investigating these options for staff and professional development from McGuffey staff and to deliver cyber learning. So we want to make sure that in this cyber learning, that a couple of the options that we are researching, that some of the teachers are able, some of the McGuffey teachers are able to implement that. Now, this is a separate entity, and so these are something that if staff want to, they can do this on as a separate. It's not like a combination. We can use our McGuffey teachers, and within the cyber learning, we can look at we can utilize outside teachers just as we get started with this process. And the one thing that we really wanted to give the cyber learning and cyber option within ours, and I know that we'll talk about this later, but this cyber education is this student would still be a part of the McGuffey district and be able to partake in all the activities associated with the McGuffey school district. And we thought that was very important as well. Just to give an option for, just like Ms. Fleck alluded to earlier about families who aren't feeling comfortable. But with that cyber learning, we are looking for a commitment because we are trying to schedule and at least to give a commitment for a 9-week session, but we're still in the process of that. Yes. So since my microphone was not on at the beginning, I wanted to touch base on the technology, and once again, I do apologize about the microphone. But as I mentioned earlier, the technology is a huge component, and one of the things that the district is really we're expanding on is a one-to-one implementation of a device. This device could be a Chromebook or an iPad, but mostly Chromebooks. And so as this technology is huge, and this is an intricate part of this entire process, the other obstacle that we were really researching and diving into is our students without internet. And we are as a team, as a group, as a committee, and as a community, and that's why we're doing this today and reaching out, is we are looking for viable options for our students without internet. And I think that's our most important thing. We want to make sure that all of our students have the opportunity to get a great education. And I think that that's our most important thing. We are researching different options. We have some options are not the best, but we are trying to get as much of the technology out there and accessibility as we can. And I think that that's, as a team and as a community, that's what we're working towards. We're also researching different options for providing synchronous and asynchronous instruction. And the difference between the two instructions is synchronous is something is something that's happening live, and asynchronous is something that a student or someone can go back and review. It's already recorded. And so we are working with the staff, and we're working on how to implement that within our instruction. And we want to continue to partner with professional development associated with technology, not only for the staff, but also for our families. It is truly something that we want to move forward. That what was done in the spring of March 2020 was almost a survival. We had to move forward. It was fast. It was quick. And as we are approaching the upcoming school year, we want to make sure that everybody is trained, they feel comfortable on technology, both staff and students. And we feel it's very vital and important that we provide that professional development, not only for the staff, like I said, but also for the students when they come in here. And we want to provide some sort of partnership in professional development or tutorials for our community. As we move on to the next slide, the curriculum instruction, this has been a big task for us as a committee and as a whole committee. And some of the things that we are addressing in our committees is attendance policies, assessment and grading practices. We're looking at managing transitions between the learning environment options going from full remote to blended to a full open. We're looking at how that is transitioning and how that affects the curriculum and instruction and how we apply that curriculum. Google Classroom trainings for students, staff, and families, like I mentioned. And I think having that consistency will help families with multiple children in multiple grades. We are also training and coaching in use of digital tools and programs. And I think that's huge and important. And we're trying to develop a consistency across the district of what is a great digital tool and how that can really apply to all of our students. We also looked at the gap analysis, and what we did here was look at the gap analysis across the district in relationship to missed instruction from the spring until now. I know that we gave learning opportunities in the spring, and we want to know what kinds of things do we have to be cognizant of moving forward as the fall instruction begins, and as the students come in, and what kind of gap are they going to present. And we recognize that, and we want to be proactive in providing that instruction to them so that they are caught up quickly. We are also reviewing national standards for quality online teaching. And like I mentioned before, the digital components of our current physical materials, I know in the spring, what that just means is the digital components and the devices that we used in the spring, a lot of them were free and now they're not. And so we're looking to review and how to implement effective digital components and how we can really implement an effective instruction to our students. And like I said, we are really striving to provide a great education experience. I know that even in this difficult time that we have to overcome, and I think that's, as a staff and as a district, this is a huge component of how we want to move forward in our reopening of our school. Safety and everything is great, but we also want to provide good instruction.
My name is Carissa Rychek. I'm the supervisor of special education here at the district. We're excited about the feedback that we have received over the last week. And so we have put together some frequently asked questions. On the district website, if you go to the far left side underneath the building names, there's a new tab that talks about return to school. This presentation that we have been going over in blue tonight is on the website, along with another document that's called the FAQ that is yellow. There are a lot of questions already on that presentation. We are not going to go over all of them this evening, but there are some that have been very thematic that have come up. And so I am going to touch base, Mr. Welk and I, on a few of those questions before we open it up to the public to ask any more further questions. And before we go into that document, though, there were a lot of questions this morning about how are we preparing students coming back in regards to knowing the different routines and roles or even the different orientations. So Mr. Gottrin has been heading up our social emotional learning committee, and he is going to touch base on that a few moments now.
Hi, thank you, Mrs. Rychek, for that introduction. And I appreciate everybody's time and commitment to being here this evening, to sharing and just listening and being part of this process. You know, we've certainly invested a lot of time and energy into it as a administrative team, and I know so many in our school community and our parents and community members have as well. And so while this isn't on tonight's specific slideshow that you see from the district presentation, it is on the kind of the full version of it is on the social media postings that we shared out with the presentation from last week. And I know a lot of you guys participated in that or viewed that. And you can also go back and actually watch the full presentation on the McGuffey Zoom YouTube channel from Thursday night. But I did want to share just a few kind of highlights from the social emotional learning and kind of what that is and what our committee's role is. everything that you've just kind of heard about and talked to everybody about is being safe, the concept of being safe and being equipped to provide learning for students, whereas the social and emotional side of it is about feeling safe and feeling ready to learn, and kind of that the invisible things, but the important things that are going to help help all of our school community to come back and be ready and be prepared to learn and to feel like we're equipped and we're safe. And so kind of the way we're going to do that, and you know, there is a student component, a parent / community component, and then a staff component, but especially at the student level, and that's going to be our main focus, right? Because students are our entire goal and our entire focus, right? Providing them the best that we can. And so on the student side, we are, and we do a similar approach for our positive behavior programs and our academic and attendance programs, looking at a 3-tiered model where tier 1 is the majority of your students, and they require some level of support, but not a ton of additional or personalized or small group support. Think of it as the equivalent of like most children see the pediatrician for their annual checkup or their annual appointment, and we want to make sure that that's happening, but they don't necessarily need intensive visits with a specialist or anything like that. And so that is the tier 1 level is the level that most students fall into. And so some of the things we're going to do there, we are going to revamp some of our PBIS matrices for, you know, STARS at Claysville, SOAR at Joe Walker, PRIDE at the middle school, and actually update those posters to have specific return to school concepts for the kids about how to engage and interact in this new environment, because even though it's an environment they're familiar with in a lot of ways, there's going to be some significant changes that we want to make sure that they are learning in a language and in a way that's familiar to them. We're also going to just do a lot of work at that tier 1 level, class meetings with groups of students, and of course probably smaller groups at the individual classroom level, because we don't want to put an entire building in the auditorium given the steps we're taking for social distancing, but making sure that each class gets that opportunity to share, hey, how have you been? This was a pretty wild thing to go through. How's everybody feeling? Tell us, you know, what your takeaways are from the sudden school closure and everything we've been through as a school community. We're going to have classroom lessons and things like that teachers can do at the classroom level. And so that's kind of our tier 1 student support system. And many of our students are going to receive those supports and be like, awesome, I'm ready to learn. I get it. I have to sit this particular way in the cafeteria, at least for now. And then they're going to be locked and ready to go. There's going to then be a smaller group of students remaining that becomes our tier 2 and tier 3 groups of students. And so tier 2, they will receive all the stuff that everyone does at tier 1, but we're going to identify them, or they're going to self-identify potentially as kids that maybe need a little bit more social emotional support, maybe struggled a little bit more, maybe have some specific anxieties about coming back. And so we're going to do that through our student assistance program, which is already operational at every building. It's actually a Pennsylvania requirement that every school building offers that. And so that we already have staff members trained in providing that student assistance support. We're also leaning closely and heavily, as always, on our school counselors and our school social worker and our school psychologists, kind of all of the groups that provide those social emotional learning and supports. And we had heavy representation on our social and emotional learning committee from each of those employee groups. And they're ready. They understand that there's going to be a lot asked of them from students coming back. And they're already looking at a couple of programs that walk students through those kind of more personalized, either small group or individualized supports at that level. And so we, along with that, we are looking at putting together some kind of one-page documents. Like an example I could think of is, a one-page thing that says transportation, and then underneath it would be kind of an infographic style, easy to digest, easy to look at and understand. Okay, here's what I can expect from in terms of my bus, and try to have those pushed out to students and families well before the first day of school, so that they're not coming in the door completely cold, right? Especially because we're limited on in-person orientations and things of that nature. And we're also looking at doing some different handbook stuff with resources, an addendum to our existing student handbook specific to the return to school, and possibly recording some videos actually showing a person or a few people going through like what the lunch line will look like and how to go into the cafeteria or how to board a bus and the different procedures that Mr. Wilson talked about. So those are things that you can expect to be developed. And then we also tentatively, depending on what is in the works in terms of what we can do and what size a group can gather, we're looking at doing some welcome back kind of event that focuses on wellness and resources, equipping our students and community with resources. Second, the needs of our community from a social emotional learning perspective. First of all, I'd like to say to any community member who's listening or participating this evening, we talk so much about our students. We know you're valuable and we know you've been through a lot, just like our students have, right? We all have. And so one of our big focuses is to hear what you're sharing as community members and do our best to meet your needs, right? We heard about a need for a better understanding of how to navigate the stuff on Google Classroom. And so we're going to try to incorporate some of that into our resource manuals and documents. We're looking at an appropriate way as a district to say thank you as parents and community members for hanging in there and being patient and being flexible as we navigate through all of this. Looking at a family handbook, probably going to be similar to the addendum to the student handbook, but maybe have some family specific resources and things like that can be a quick guide all in one place. And really in these town halls are an example of this, just trying to make sure that we communicate and that we let you know what we can and what we do know. And there's a lot of things that are changing, a lot of things that look different day to day. But we're committed to doing our best to get the information out to you. So definitely, keep attention on the district website and on the district social media channels. And we will do our best to post what we know as soon as it's available to be shared. And so the last thing, just very briefly, we also do have an eye on the social emotional needs of our staff and their ability to meet the needs of our students and community, right? And so one thing that really is going to be focused on during our beginning of year staff professional development days is an emphasis on how to welcome the kids back, the things that students may be feeling or experiencing. And that's going to be led again by our guidance counselors, our social worker, our school psychologists, individuals that are really familiar with those concepts, and they've attended some of their own professional developments through the beginning of the summer on these topics. But we're going to look at what trauma-informed care is, different types or levels of trauma that students have probably experienced or may have experienced during this pandemic. Also, ways to help staff identify struggling students, and then making sure that our staff is well versed and familiar with the student assistance program, what we mean when we talk about tier 2 and tier 3 supports. And lastly, the staff is going to have some development on when the kids come back, how they can foster feelings of safety within their classrooms and within their school buildings. And a lot of it is stuff that once you hear it, you're like, oh, of course. And truthfully, a lot of it is stuff that many of our teachers are doing every single day, right? Greeting kids at the door, saying hello, welcoming them in, asking them how they're feeling, how they're doing, but making that explicit and making that concrete. And then the last thing for staff is we will offer an employee assistance program to any staff members that need that. So I appreciate the chance to share. And like I said, I know the social emotional learning slide is not in this evening's presentation, but if you go to the presentation from Thursday night or the bigger presentation that was on social media, you can look at the specific slide and watch the full presentation with social emotional learning and supports. But we're excited and appreciate the chance to share. And so with that, I will kick it back to Mrs. Rychik and to Mr. Welk to start off with the frequent questions document. Thank you, everybody.
This is Carissa Rychek again, and just to piggyback with Mr. Gottschalk, we very much want to hear the input from the community. And so we have established a new email address that we would ask that if you have any follow-up questions or suggestions, definitely reach out to us. In summary, we are presenting to our school board on Thursday evening the blended learning model, which is a combination of in-person and distance learning when we are on the yellow or the green model modes here in Pennsylvania. If Pennsylvania is declared to be in the red phase, we would then move to fully distance learning. Separate from that blended model, we are also looking to offer the McGuffey sponsored cyber program. This is not a requirement. This is just an option for families to be able to choose this, and it would be available for all students. A very fair question that should come up has been asked: has the district considered a full return to school as an option for the fall? And I want to reassure this whole team very sincerely wants to say that we want our students in our buildings as often as possible. The hallways are too quiet right now. With that said, though, we care about them so much that we want to make sure that they're here as safely as possible as well. So we very much started our conversations with looking at how do we have them here 5 days a week. After we applied the extensive guidance from the CDC and PDE, that's when we realized the only way to keep our students safe was to be recommending the blended model, because that is how we can implement the 6 feet social distancing. We know that face coverings are a controversial concern, and we're able to, because we are able to offer the 6 feet social distancing in the classroom, then we can have the face covering breaks while students are seated in their classrooms. And then we feel that that gives us the greatest opportunity to have face-to-face instruction with our students. Also, we know that under the current guidance from PDE, if Washington County were to be moved to the yellow zone, we would have to then do the hybrid model or fully distance learning. And so with us planning the blended model now, we would be able to be in this for the long haul of the same model and continuity of education between the green and the yellow. Another question that comes up often is, will assignments be graded in the fall? And with a very resounding yes. There will be formal grades no matter what instructional model is being offered. We will, of course, have flexibility with due dates, understanding that students may, especially during distance learning times, may be engaging in learning in like the non-typical school hours. They may be working with family members in the evenings or on weekends, so we would be flexible, but there would definitely be formal grades issued. Similarly, we will be tracking attendance, and attendance will be enforced in regards to compulsory education. We would modify our current attendance policy to reflect a cyber program and the unique needs that a program like that requires in regards to instruction. Our school board will also be looking at passing a resolution that would allow us to count the hours for distance learning, and our blended model would be able to count towards the 180 days of instruction and the required 900 hours for elementary students and 990 hours for our secondary students.
Hello, this is Mr. Welk. I'm going to continue with the questions here. Another question we had a lot of was, would parents be able to preview the cyber option before choosing this option? So to clarify what the cyber option is, that is the 5-day-a-week cyber option. The answer to that question is yes. The content is reflective of what is currently taught, which is aligned to the PA state standards. This means that it is the same skill being taught at the same grade level. The difference would be the lessons, assignments, resources, textbooks, and materials and activities would not be the same. They could be different. There will be family presentations scheduled about our cyber program. Once the board approved plan is passed on Thursday, we're looking at scheduling those next week, and we'll know what our cyber program is next week. What is the protocol for a student teacher who tests positive for COVID-19? So this is currently, as of today, our understanding is that anyone testing positive for the virus must be isolated and quarantined. This would include any student staff that came into direct contact with the quarantined individual. The district will consult with the health department and will make the appropriate notifications based on the health department's guidance. So that means that the health department would then implement contact tracing, and we would be in direct contact with the health department.
Hi, this is Mr. McKee again. I just want to expand on that a little bit. And somebody testing positive doesn't necessarily mean that that person that tested positive was one of our visitors. That may have been, some parent of a student and so on. So it might not immediately mean we have a closure. So that's why it says the district consult with the health department and make appropriate notifications and so on, because it just depends on where it originates and where those people were. Thank you.
So to piggyback off of that, if you would have tested positive and you'd have to be in a quarantine, would quarantine days be excused per attendance guidelines for the student? Yes, they would, as long as the child is participating in distance education based on if they're able to do that. The days may count towards days of instruction. How are internet access issues being addressed? Increased internet access in our district has been a focus of our efforts over the past few months. We talked this morning, we know it's an issue, and we're trying everything we can to rectify the issue. Here are a couple of unique efforts that we are currently developing to aid in increasing the access to students around our district. Mr. Wilson has implemented with the Kajib, the traveling Wi-Fi program, where district vans go to points in the community. We have increased outside wireless access at our buildings. So if you would be in our parking lots or anywhere around our campus, you could connect to the internet and use the Wi-Fi. And we are attaining Wi-Fi hotspots for student learning opportunities. Now, those hotspots do operate off of data. So there was a question earlier, if you don't have good cell data reception, we are still looking at ways to rectify that issue. How is the distance learning in the fall different than in the spring in regards to lack of internet access? We are currently in the process of obtaining mobile broadband devices to create a student learning program for internet access. We are currently working to obtain enough devices, Chromebooks, to equip K through 12 students. And because students will be in buildings in the blended model consistently throughout the week, that means that they could download their assignments before they would go home for the extended period of time and be able to get those assignments while in the school building, while they have internet access, allowing them to use Google Classroom offline. I'm going to pass it back over to Mrs. Todd to finish the presentation.
That completes the presentation of the return to school and the frequently asked questions. At this time, we will let Mr. Wilson give his information on how we get public input.
Good evening. This is Mr. Wilson again. Just a reminder, there are quite a few people, quite a few participants on the meeting this evening. So if you're not talking, if you could please remain muted as far as your microphone is concerned. We're going to entertain a question and answer session at this point. So if you are a participant in the meeting and you would like to speak, or you would like to ask a question or make a comment about the plan that we went over tonight, please use the raise hand function, and then we will go individually and allow you to unmute your microphone and speak so everybody can hear. If you're using an Android or an Apple device, there's a menu button on the control panel that will allow you to raise your hand. If you're using a laptop, you'll have to go into the participants menu, and then next to your name, use the raised hand function. At this point, Mrs. Todd, we have one person wanting to speak. Coiler, if you unmute your microphone at this point, you can ask some questions, and you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. My biggest concern is I have other children that have passed through the school district, phenomenal school district. Mrs. Fleck, you're phenomenal. Mr. Bonus, you're phenomenal. I have another child that's entering into kindergarten. And my biggest question with this whole COVID shutdown and everything is doctors, vaccinations, the rest of it. I myself, my fiance, have been chasing doctors and the actual, what is it up in Washington, where they can supply shots and everything too for specific shots that are needed and required. My question is, there's like a total shutdown where you try to plan, you try to schedule, you try to do all of these things to get the final vaccinations, and there's a stall. There's a big problem and a stall. And I don't want that to be a problem with my child starting into this whole new curriculum and the rest. She already passed through the preschool at Joe Walker. And I want to know what can be done, or how can we escalate and or get this taken care of, because I'm sure lots of other parents are experiencing the exact same problem to get finalized with the required vaccinations and shots for our children to start. Can you answer that for me?
Thank you for such a thoughtful question. This is Carissa Rychak. As of right now, the Pennsylvania Department of Education and the Department of Health, they have not put out any allowances for exceptions to those immunization requirements at this time. We do anticipate that to happen. I will say, though, there is a provision as long as students are on a medical plan to begin to catch up with their immunizations, you can be provisionally admitted. And so that would be my best advice at this point, is to work with a PCP and look at that provisional. But I definitely really appreciate the feedback with that, because I will be transparent that was probably on my nurse's radar. That was not on my radar. And so I will definitely look into that tomorrow to kind of see where the state's timetable and guidance is on that. And we'll follow up with you and also put out communication district-wide, because that definitely would not be just you. You're definitely not alone in that. So thank you for.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm not alone. I really appreciate that, because like I said, we have made several contacts up in Washington to get one individual shot that her own PCP, based on her age, cannot give. They basically, it's been like a turnaround back and forth, back and forth. They'll call you and then they'll say you had an appointment. Now it's canceled. Now it's extended. COVID has gotten larger. We can't do it. And we're trying to the best of our abilities to make sure everything, including for other young children, because these vaccines also safeguard them, just like masks. So, I mean, when you really think about it, I don't want my child giving another child something that, she wasn't vaccinated for, simply to start school. But at the same time, I want her to be able to start school and to move forward. So I wanted to see if there was a provision based on the fact that county governments and a lot of these other institutions have been really stalled with this situation.
Sure. And our nurses, like I said, they always are on top of it. I already received a text message with a verification that there has been a grace period as long as there has been at least one of every vaccine. And then, like I said, too, just even under normal non-COVID circumstances, there are the provisional as long as there's a medical plan made with a doctor. So we'll put together some information and make sure that that is communicated. So thank you so very much.
Excellent. And if you need me to contact you directly, I will, to give you my personal information if that's needed.
Yes, we have that information. Thank you so much.
Thank you too.
Thank you. Next on the list, we have Emily Dale with her hand raised. Emily, go ahead and unmute your microphone and you have the floor.
Hello, thank you for this plan. I really appreciate the thought that everyone put into it. I just had a question for a friend, actually. She was trying to ask this morning and somehow wasn't able to. She was wondering if with the current changes, your child ended up staying home from school. Let's say they had a fever and they couldn't get to the doctor right away. If they were still working from home, even if it was their day to be in school, would that be able to be excused, or would that still be considered an absence in the traditional form?
Hi, Emily. It's Cheryl Fleck. Absolutely, that would be an excused day, and they could participate online.
Thanks so much.
Sure.
Thank you, Emily. Next on the list, we have Katie Lau. Katie, go ahead and unmute your microphone and you have the floor.
Hey everybody, my name is Katie Lowe. I have 2 girls at Claysville, and I was just wondering what it's going to look like on the days that our students aren't in the classroom. What is that work going to look like? Because I obviously know it's going to be on Google Classroom, but I guess I was just wondering, is it just going to be a continuation of what they're learning in class? I'm assuming it's not going to be busy work. So that's it.
Hi, Katie. Cheryl Fleck here. We're working right now with our curriculum committee, and that the design of what that will look like will be a lot different than the spring. And we are looking at both synchronous and asynchronous sessions. We're looking at some flipped learning where there might be assignments for students to do at home that will not require the internet, but things that they could do, kind of prerequisites prior to coming back into the building. I can tell you that the teachers will be definitely in contact with those students and families. But that's going to look a little differently, and we are going to be getting out as soon as we meet with the teachers and the faculty. We'll be getting out procedures and the expectations actually for those teachers as well on what's expected of them. So you should be seeing, we want to get a clear picture, and we will be doing some parent orientations in August. I'm saying at the beginning of August, just to give you some preliminary what that will look like for that distance learning portion.
Awesome. Well, we miss you guys and we love you.
Oh, we miss you too.
Be back in the classroom.
Mrs. Lowe, this is Mr. Bonus. I'm principal at McGuffey High School. And just to follow up on what Ms. Fleck's saying, I think everybody understands that in the spring it was somewhat chaotic. It was somewhat rashly implemented. And we did what we needed to do to support student learning, but it wasn't an ideal in any way, shape, or form.
Absolutely.
And not that, that online is equivalent to being in the physical classroom. Everybody also has that understanding. But taking into consideration the current crisis that we're under, we think the blended model is the best way to move forward, obviously advancing towards a full opening within hopefully soon. But the curriculum to be implemented this year will need to be something that sort of has a dynamic where it's a a daily instructional objective that relates to the students in the physical environment and to the students online, meaning each day has to have a specific instructional objective to be completed, regardless of what format you're in. If you think about it, if we're doing, let's say the option A where it's the A and B, if the B group just gets the same that the A group got on Monday and Tuesday, if we followed that type of model throughout the year, not that we would do it, but you'd only cover half the curriculum
Right.
in the course. So we're looking at planning and curriculum and implementation of a plan that pulls together, like I said, online, synchronous, asynchronous types of supports for students outside the classroom that coincides with what the students are doing in the physical classroom. And we have to have some conversations with our faculty and get their feedback as well on those types of practices. But that's probably going to be one of the biggest differences that you'll notice in terms of the differences between the spring and what we're looking at with the blended model in the fall. We clearly understand that. We don't believe under any circumstances it's a valid practice to cover half the content, and that's just not going to hold. So those are conversations once we know the model that we're going to implement and have approved by the school board and whatever that may be, depending on their decision, how we could move forward with that. But that's definitely one of our biggest fears, and we know parents' biggest fears and students' biggest fears. So whenever we have that final adoption, we'll be able to move forward with those processes. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for clarifying that.
Thank you, Katie. Next on the list, we have Wendy Main with her hand up. Wendy, go ahead and unmute your microphone, and you have the floor to ask questions or make comments.
Thanks. I just have a quick question. Can you hear me? Because sometimes my internet don't work.
No, we hear you good.
Okay. My question is, when you decide for the kids to go back to school, how are they deciding on the groups? Is it by last names or by, because I've kind of missed some of these meetings because of my internet. Is it by last name or is it by, I wasn't sure how they were choosing that.
Wendy, this is Dan Gautran, assistant principal at the middle school and acting principal Joe Walker. One of the things we talked about as a group was that we want to keep family or household units together. And so we also realized that just going by last name doesn't necessarily capture every family and household dynamic. So we're going to be coming through our students and working to make sure that households and family units are together, and not just necessarily by alphabetical, because we know that's not always the case for a family structure. So hopefully that helps kind of explain our priority for the reopening.
Yeah, I was just wondering because both my kids have different, and if they were going A through L, well, it's a cutoff point. My son's is L and my daughter starts with an M. So I'm like, I would be right like every other day, but they'd be going every day. Now, my other question was, we have bad internet in Taylorstown, but we have a FiOS line that runs by us. They won't let us tie into it for some reason, which would cure all of us out here if they would let us. And I don't know why we're not being able to tie into the FiOS line.
If you could, do you have an email address where you can email us that information? We will reach out to whoever we can and maybe see if there's a way we can get the ability, or at least try and get an answer as to why they won't let you tie in. But if you would email us that information, one of us here would gladly see if we can facilitate that process.
Yes, I will.
Ms. May, this is Mr. Principal at the middle school. Along with that question that you just asked, and with Mrs. Todd's request, for more information from you, we had mentioned, in our board meeting last week that there is still a broadband internet access task force that was formed by the district and trying to work in conjunction with the townships and boroughs to work on this larger problem of broadband internet access throughout the McGuffey School District. Obviously, the problem, goes much farther than what the school district has the power to fix quickly, but that's part of trying to enter into a partnership with everyone in the community to try to improve the situation. And what you're describing, though I haven't heard much about that yet, I think is exactly the type of information that we're trying to understand about, what different areas of the district look like and why. So I know I'm on that committee. I know several other of our administrators and staff are, and we would love to get more information from you about that situation in your area to see, like Mrs. Todd said, if we can somehow take that to our working task force and improve that situation.
Okay, yeah, I'll email Mrs. Todd.
Yes, that's fine. You can email me.
Okay, I will do that. Thanks.
Thank you. At this point, I do not see any other participants in the meeting with their hands raised, indicating that they would like to speak. I spoke too soon. Angela Phillips has her hands raised. Angela, if you go ahead and unmute your microphone, and you have the floor to ask questions or make comments.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me? I'm outside.
Yep.
My neighbor's mowing, so I apologize. First of all, I want to say thank you guys for everything you have been doing. I know this is different and a difficult time. I have a question about working parents, and I already emailed and I got a response, which was good, about the attendance. There's going to be flexibility as far as trying to get our assignments done out of normal hours. Is there going to be any kind of support for kids aftercare or some kind of daycare or something where there are both parents working, or a single parent, say, who cannot be home whenever their kid is supposed to be in the cyber school?
This is Carissa Rychek. Thank you so much. You've been a great communicator through this whole process, and we just really appreciate that. I don't think we're prepared to answer with a definitive answer with that tonight in regards to after our services, but I think that is, I think everyone on this stage would agree that that's a phenomenal suggestion and something that we definitely need to look at. I'm sure you can appreciate that there's some contractual obligations that we would need to work with the teacher. There's some with the teachers, there's some financial implications, but these are unusual times and it's definitely worth us exploring. So I appreciate that suggestion.
Thank you. You've been a big help too. I've spoken to you a few times and I appreciate everything that you guys are doing. I really do. So I just want to say thanks.
Thank you, Angela. Next on the list, we have Justin Markey, I believe it is. Justin, go ahead and unmute your microphone and you have the floor.
Okay. I have a couple of questions. Comments. We all completed the survey, and there probably 30% of the people, I can't remember the exact percentages offhand, but a lot of people were in favor of going to school 5 days, not necessarily in favor of masks. I get that the governor came out with his rules for masks, but it feels like the survey was put out there and then completely neglected whenever actually you guys came to making rules. It seems like you made whatever rules you felt like doing without really paying attention to what the survey said. And then, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
We wanted to point out that we are trying to make the safest decision. And while we did do the survey and we are looking at those surveys, we only had about 500 people in the district respond, and we have 1,600 kids. So we are still implementing. Our goal is to be back 5 days a week. But with just the 500 people, we're trying to be responsible for the the population of the 1,600 with the goal of coming back and continually watching the guidelines. So our ultimate goal would be to be back in school 5 days a week. But in order to do it safely and adhere to the six-foot distancing requirement, that and enable the kids to take off the masks, that is a big topic where people would like their kids to not have to wear the masks all day. If we reduce to the 3-foot guideline, the kids are going to be required to wear their masks all day. So we were trying to implement a blended program that gave the kids the ability to be in school and not have to wear the masks the entire day, and try to service the whole population. With the intent, we are still looking at those surveys, and our ultimate goal is to be back 5 days a week.
Okay, 2 points off of that. Those surveys are by household, not necessarily by child. I know I have 2 kids in my house, so one survey for 2 kids. I know people that have 3 or however many kids. So it's not necessarily 500 students that are represented in that survey. And I don't know that we have a number of how many students were represented in that survey. And as far as the social distancing, earlier Mr. Wilson was talking about reducing the social distancing for busing purposes so that you could get double the number of kids on the bus. But then you're still not addressing. It's okay to do it on the bus, but it's not okay to do it in the school. Or how are you going to do it whenever you're talking about soccer, or football, or any of these other activities that are basically contact sports? It seems like the standards are applied as they want to be applied, or as somebody wants them to be applied when they want them to be applied, but not necessarily in all instances.
And so this is Mr. Wilson. I can speak specifically to the transportation. When we were looking at busing, if you look at the structure of the bus and the way the seats are compartmentalized, we felt that there was a little bit of a barrier there that we could help mitigate that and be within the 6 feet, but still remain diligent about wearing masks. And that was part of the reason why on the buses we were looking at that reduction of the social distance. But as far as sports, I don't know if Mr. Welk or Mr. Bonus may want to speak specifically about that.
I'm sorry. 900.
This is Mrs. Rychek. I wanted to clarify, the survey results did encompass 940 students.
Okay, so now we're above half at least.
And as to athletics, I'll let Mr. Welk talk about the athletic plan. That's a plan that they came up with independent of the return. It's part of the return to school, but it was a separate process. So I'll let Mr. Welk touch on that.
So for our athletic plan, students have to sign a waiver to participate in the sport. This was given by the PIAA guidance, which oversees all sports in the state of Pennsylvania, and they worked with the Department of Health on that. So it's a little bit different process.
And we will visit this and look at it and take into consideration all the input. We're just trying to keep the community safe and keep the community open, because we don't want to have an outbreak at the school that would close the entire community. So we're trying to do an operation that gets the children educated safely and keeps everyone safe. The students, the staff, the parents, the community, and that's our goal. We understand that you would like them back 5 days a week, and we would as well. We're just trying to work within the guidelines and do it with the total safety and responsibility that we can as an organization.
Okay, well, at this point, I have a second grader, some kid going into second grade and one going into 8th grade, and it's highly likely, extremely highly likely that I'm withdrawing the second grader. And I'm talking to the 8th grader to see what our route would be with that. But this plan I don't agree with. So that's my input. Thanks.
We would encourage you to continue to review our plan, and we will continue to review our plan as well. This is a draft document, and it's very fluid. And as we get guidance, we will continue to change and update our plan with the goal of getting the students back. And if you would like to talk to, I'm not sure, your second grader is Claysville?
Joe Walker.
Joe Walker. If you would like to talk personally with Mr. Gautran, you can call Mr. Gautran, you can call myself, or I know you could call any administrator if you want to have other conversations about what the day would look like or how we could maybe accommodate them. We would gladly have those conversations because our true goal is not to lose any students. Our true goal is to get all students back here 5 days a week and keep all students safe. So I would just encourage you to reach out to our administration and talk with us, and we will certainly keep you posted as to where we are going.
Yeah, my main problem is that me and my wife both work 5 days a week, and coming off of the spring, it's almost impossible for us to actually work and get anything done with helping the kids do their work. So I'm cheating my boss by not getting as much done as I should, or I have to work way late in the night to try and make up for it. So if I'm going to take him out and put him into somewhere that has a 5-day program, then that's what I have to do. And that's fine. I don't think there's really anything that we need to discuss about that further. If there's not a 5-day program, there's not a 5-day program. But thanks. I appreciate your time, though.
Thank you.
Justin, this is Dan Gautran. I'm of course filling in for Marie Pupo over at Joe Walker at the moment. So I'd be happy to talk, like you said, depending on if the hybrid option is what we move forward with, then I don't know exactly how to help you, but I would definitely be happy to talk to you and talk through like how we get back to the 5-day option or what we can do to maybe be of support with the hybrid option. So even if you've already kind of made that decision, I'd be happy to touch base. So I'll be in touch with you in the next little bit here to see what we can do about that. So I appreciate you being open and honest kind of with your position on it. So I just wanted to make sure you heard that.
Yep, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. Next on the list, there's a participant labeled Pixel 3 XL. If you could give us our name, or your name rather, and unmute your microphone, you have the floor.
Hi, this is Jody Kearns, and I actually just, my daughter is entering kindergarten, and I also have a daughter that is entering 3rd grade. We have one laptop. Now, will their assignments that they have to do at home, is it something that they're going to be on for 2-3 hours each? Do we need to get another laptop, or will one Chromebook be given to my kindergartner, or how is that going to work?
Hi, this is Cheryl Fleck at Claysville, and we will be providing technology for all of our students. So I don't anticipate that any student needs to be on there for 2 or 3 hours. However, we will provide you with a Chromebook or an iPad for the students that do not have a device. Absolutely.
Okay, and also to the sports. I actually I don't know what the waiver you were talking about, but I actually pulled my daughter off of the softball team because there was no social distancing, there was not any guidelines, nothing to keep the kids safe. And when I had talked to the main coordinator or whoever he is, I was basically told that no, the adults coaches will not be wearing a mask, that if my daughter wanted to, she could, but yet she is the one playing and running in the heat. And I don't know how these guidelines are okay for classroom, but not okay for sports, where it's like the sports are the exception.
Excuse me, ma'am. Was your daughter participating in a McGuffey high school sport?
No, she is.
So I was referencing the extracurricular activities through the school district with the waiver. We don't have any control over youth sports.
Mr. Welk, I think Ms. Kern's call dropped.
Hopefully she can come back on. Right now, we'll move to Mary Ellen Wheeler.
We don't have good internet service here.
Okay.
Mr. Welk was explaining that we only control the McGuffey Middle School, High School sports. So the youth programs that are operating, we do not have control over those.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to make that clear that it does seem like a double standard for sports where these young kids are expected so much at school, but yet they're in close proximities with all the same peers that they're with while playing. So how do we explain that to them? Again, having to take her off, she was devastated, but trying to explain to her that this is not okay. When you go back to school, it's going to be something completely different, but yet she's seeing these same people and same students with her at school.
We completely understand.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. Next on the list, we have Mary Ellen Wheeler. If you want to go ahead and unmute your microphone, do you have some questions or concerns?
Yeah, I do. On the option to cyber school, first, how do you sign up for that? And second, is the VOTEC going to be included in that?
Hello, Mrs. Wheeler. It's Mr. Welk. So whenever we have the board approved plan, we're going to reach out to any family interested and put together some sessions where we can talk about what the program is. If the student is enrolled, that's the 5-day-a-week cyber school program. In the McGuffey program, they can still participate in Western area.
Now, do they have to go to Western area, or could they do that on cyber also?
I believe the Western area is only going to provide at least. Mrs. Wheeler, this is Mr. Bonus. I've had some discussions with Mrs. Adams, the principal down at Western area, and right now they're sort of finalizing what their details are going to be for the support of their students and their CTC programs down there. They're serving 7 school districts, and 7 school districts might have 7 different models for how they're going to be able to operate for their students. So once we get a finalized plan there in place, of course, if the student chooses the McGuffey cyber option, I agree with Mr. Welk, they would be permitted to attend Western area, but we would have to work with them to see what type of mix of blended online or physical types of attendance that Western area was looking at as a program for their students.
Oh, and how do you do that? How are we going to do the IEP with the McGuffey cyber?
Ms. Wheeler, it is Mrs. Bychek. There are, as you know, online cyber programs that have been in existence that do implement IEPs. And so we feel very confident that we would reconvene the IEP teams for any of our students that are in the McGuffey cyber program and revise the IEP as needed.
Okay, and if he goes into the McGuffey cyber program, he'll still graduate from McGuffey, correct?
Absolutely. And that really is what a great benefit of the McGuffey cyber program is, because we get to keep our tax dollars here within the district. We get to continue that wonderful school pride. We have the support of the teachers that already have the relationships with our students. We get to keep that consistency with any IEP or extra supports that are needed. And students are still welcome and very much encouraged to participate in extracurricular and sport events So they continue to be blue and gold all the way through.
Okay. Anything else? You sure? Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. Next on the list, we have Tiffany Tichnell. If you want to unmute your microphone, and you have the floor.
Okay. My name is Tiffany. I'm South Franklin Borough with a daughter at Joe Walker, 4th grade. So just a couple questions my husband and I had after the meeting this morning that we kind of shook our heads about. The first question is temperature checks. Who is ultimately responsible for that? Is that going to be the parents in the morning before the kids leave the house? Or is there going to be a nurse station there at the doorway with a nurse checking their temperature when they get there? My second question is in regards to the cyber school. As far as I know, I was on that committee. We had one meeting and there is no definite cyber school in the works. We're down to roughly about a month and 15 days or so before we get back to school. And that hasn't even been confirmed yet. And then the teachers would not actually be ours, from my understanding at first, because our teachers would have to be trained by that cyber school that we're going with before our teachers could resume teaching of our students again. So I'm not sure how that would work. My question comes down to the students that don't wear masks. There's talk of contact tracing. If it's found that it comes from a student that was not participating in wearing a mask, because I'm full 100% mask wearing, I think they should have them on 100% of the time, whatever that may be, whoever that offends, I'm sorry. But if it comes down and it's a child that just doesn't wear one because that's the belief of the parents and that's how it comes down, what legal recourses do we have as parents? Because, if you've infected my child because you don't follow mandated rules, what ground do I have to stand on? Because now my child's sick and out for 14 days. Those are my questions. I'm just looking for answers again. Thanks.
Thank you, Tiffany. And this is Mrs. Rychak. In regards to the cyber program, as I communicated with everyone that had been on the meetings last week, we have, and we kind of predicted this last week, that we know we're running out of time. And so we will be asking the board for permission to partner with another organization that has developed the lessons in the curriculum. We are looking at having McGuffey teachers help facilitate that and help support our students. We very much want our McGuffey teachers to be involved. And so whatever curriculum or organization that we partner with, our teachers will be able to use their ready-made lessons and content because we know that we're short on time. But the teachers will also be able to revise and modify that content as needed. And ultimately, we want our McGuffey teachers to be the ones in charge of that student's learning and assigning grades.
But if I remember correctly from the last school board meeting, and I believe it was Mr. Welk that stated it, those teachers or somebody in the board meeting stated it, those teachers that are going to participate would have to have some sort of onboarding before that could happen. So that's still going to take time. Those teachers are, they may participate, but they're not going to be your actual teachers engaging with your students right off the bat. It's going to be the other teachers from the other organization until you get your teachers up to speed, which may take several months into the process. Correct? Because I remember that from the school board meeting last Thursday.
Hello, Tiffany. This is Mr. Welk here. So depending on what outside organization cyber program we go with, we're looking at doing professional development to design classes and how many teachers are interested in designing classes very soon. So the goal would be to get those classes up and running with McGuffey teachers to start the year off. I can't say that that's 100% possible. It could be possible for some classes. And if it's like a high school class and it's, that we have some, social studies classes that we get up, but we don't have any science classes, then we might have to go to outside teachers to teach the science classes. So the goal is to get that up and running. Will it be a challenge? Yes. Will we try as hard as we can? Absolutely.
I just think it's I think it's slightly false to put out there that you're going to be blue and gold through and through to some parents when the program is yet to be designed. It's not organized, and it's a great thought. I get it. I fully support it because I'm not going to lie. We've gone through the PA cyber thing. We're in the process of completing the enrollment because I'm not 100% sure I'm sending my child back if you cannot enforce the mask policy. Not taking that risk with my child's life. So, those are the things that you have to put out there. And, if you're not going to be able to enforce it, which I understand that you can't because, you can't ask for letters and you can't do this. But again, as a parent, and I only have one child, I'm not willing to take that risk. So, again, it may be another child that is being pulled from the district because this plan that, from my understanding, goes Thursday before the board to be approved, that is yet to be fully developed and going to be altered up until the day of school. I'm not sure how you approve a plan unless we're just going off of the blended mode is going to be altered all the way up until the day of school. How do you get that approved? That doesn't seem right to me.
Well, I'm going to address the cyber school. The cyber school that we're looking at partnering with, we're looking at a couple different ones, but they are in operation and they are organized and coordinated, and they do have organized professional development that we can implement if we can get teachers interested and getting the training there that will help them build the curriculum so that for the start of school. And if we can get the cyber program approved at whichever partnership we would like to go with, IU1 is one of the partnerships that we're looking at. They can start the training in August, which would give teachers who are interested in building that curriculum the entire month to start. And they don't need to have the entire curriculum built for the first day of school. They need to have so many classes and so much built. So they would have time throughout the year, just like they would do their lesson plans, to continue to build the program. But our goal would be to get as many people as we had are interested trained to start with. The other thing that you mentioned was the temperature checks. We are going to encourage parents to take their children's temperature and do a wellness check before they leave. But upon entering the school, we will do a temperature check in the school building. And there, at the last meeting, I believe somebody made the suggestion that we do an isolation room by the doorway so that the child or adult doesn't have to walk through the building. And I think Mr. McKee is checking into something like that. And if the child has a temperature, then the nurse will go through the procedures upon entering the building. So we are asking the parents to do their due diligence, but once they enter the building, they will do a temperature screening in the building. And if there is a temperature, they would be followed up with a health check by the nurse, and then potentially sent home if they needed to be sent home. So we are doing it in conjunction with the parents, so it's more of a partnership. And as far as your liability issue, we didn't ask the solicitor to be here, and I really would hesitate to give you an answer on that because I don't know that liability issue.
Okay. And then my next question following up to that rebuttal back to the temperature checks. Some children aren't dropped off directly by their parents. Some carpool, may be different with everything going on. Some children get on the bus without parents being home because they've had to report into work. So, some of that's going to be a check safe system. And then what happens, especially at Joe Walker, like there's a mass drop off of students. So are they going to be socially distanced down the sidewalk until they can get into the nurse and have a temperature check? And then what if one or two of them have a temperature? Like you're going to have to pull your nurse from that station to do the health check. So is there a backup person to continue on with the temperature check so our child isn't standing out there on the sidewalk to get them in the building?
We're still finalizing all of that, fine details like that. But that is the plan. The plan is to make sure that we have coverage and we can get everybody in the buildings as reasonably, quickly as we can, as safely as we can. I'm sorry, it's Mr. McKee from Buildings and Grounds.
And this is
there's still a lot of ifs, maybes, what ifs, things that they can.
This is Mrs.
If
Go ahead.
I can just say, like from an operations standpoint of view and so on, since this is all so new to all of us, I would love to be able to say that I'm going to have 3 backup people and everything's going to go smoothly every day, and we're going to be able to cover every contingency, and every plan that we have is going to be perfect. But the reality is it's not, and because it is new, and because we are trying to make so many adjustments to what used to be normal. When we talk fluid, it is fluid, and we do need some help. Like Mrs. Todd says, it's much easier if you temperature check at home. That student's going to be much more likely to listen to their parent, and so on, and maybe than us. But our goal is to try and make things as normal as we can, as safe as we can, and
the community resource, that survey came out and people wanted to volunteer, but again, we did a select number of people on that survey. We didn't do a broad number in, but I'm sure if you put out another survey, are there any parents that would be willing to do temperature checks in the morning, have the nurse there as a backup? I'm sure you would get parents that would be willing to participate to keep their children safe. I know myself, I'm a nurse, my husband's a nurse. We would give you an hour in the morning to do temperature check.
Hi, Tiffany. This is Cheryl Flack at Claysville, and I can speak for the entrance at Claysville, I know, in the mornings, and we do have kind of a mass entry, and a lot of students coming in all at once. And I can see I am a little anxious already about arrival time. So we will be planning for having additional people to help with those procedures to start the school year. And I do appreciate that you are willing to volunteer. And if there's any way that we can utilize your services, certainly. Mr. Gautran, who is over at Joe Walker, can certainly reach out to you regarding that. I do believe that we will have adequate staffing at our entrances. I know certainly for the first few days or weeks, I know that the administration will be at those entrance areas along with the nurses to ensure the safety of the students' arrival. So I do appreciate, because I know what it looks like at an elementary school, and we will certainly have the staff in place to be able to social distance, to be able to screen the students, and to be able to utilize the health professionals that we need to if we do have a child that has a temperature. So I do appreciate that.
Tiffany, this is Mr. Gautran, to kind of just jump in there. And I agree in terms of your question about mask usage and the liability question. I don't know that we have an answer for that, but as we get into the school year, and if you feel as if there's a situation where there's a classmate that your child is seated near that isn't wearing a mask or something like that, certainly. If you get in touch with me, or if there's something we can work with you on, we do want every child in every situation to feel as safe as possible and to be as safe as possible, right? And so if there's a way that I can assist you with that, or brainstorm ways to support you with that within what we can do, I definitely hear your concern there, and would try my best to work with you to come up with a solution. And obviously you saw the presentation with the exemptions and what we can and can't do in terms of enforcement of mask wearing. But if that's a topic of great concern to you, I'd be happy to talk with you about what we could do within the structure of what's allowed within the building. So just wanted to let you know, I hear you on that, and we could certainly work with you if you get into a situation where you're in the classroom and you feel as if there's children around your child that are a real or potential safety concern with the mask. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out on that if that happens to come to fruition.
Okay, thank you, Tiffany. Up next on the list, we have John and Libby Chapman. If you would like to unmute your microphone, you have the floor.
Hey, good evening, everyone. This is John Chapman. I have a junior daughter who's a junior. And just first of all, I want to thank the board and the administration committees, all the teachers that have been involved in this dialogue. I realize that you've put a significant amount of time into this and very much appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity to ask some questions tonight as well. One of the things that you've mentioned that that I'm interested in is the synchronous option. And I'm wondering how strongly that option is being considered. And also would be curious to know maybe what feedback you're getting from teachers in particular about that option. Thanks.
This is Matt Wolf at Claysville Elementary, the assistant principal. We are working the synchronous, both the synchronous and asynchronous instruction. We are working with the staff, and we are gathering plus on the curriculum instruction committee, but also meeting with the union as well to talk about different options. That is something that is an ongoing process that we are about to engage in. That's a crucial component of how we're going to implement this plan for sure with the remote learning. But as of now, this is still just not a work in progress, but we're just ironing out the details on how we're going to implement this.
Mr. Chapman, this is Mr. Hartunian, the middle school principal. And, you know, to answer the question, you know, pretty directly, I think I would say very seriously being considered. And, you know, just to echo what Mr. Wolf was saying, the Curriculum Instruction Committee has been working on that, recognizing that there's great potential value in being able to do that. You know, we're mindful that there presents another challenge alongside that option, which is what that looks like for, you know, the families with limited or no internet access, which is a separate problem that we're trying to handle. And as you can imagine, is a pretty significant one to handle because there aren't, you know, for some families, there aren't quick, easy solutions to that. But we are trying to be mindful of the way we design the learning experiences within all of this, that, you know, synchronous brings with it opportunities and challenges. And again, if you're listening, synchronous, you know, referring to, you know, kind of what you think of as live instruction, where asynchronous would be more like, you know, content that could be, you know, downloaded and accessed at a later time. So yes, the answer is we are, you know, having a lot of discussions about it and considering it pretty seriously, but, you know, it definitely requires some coordination and input from the faculty and, you know, and work with their representation. So, and then with that also comes, you know, all the technical components of having synchronous instruction, the, you know, technology and resources required to pull that off in, you know, classrooms of 140 instructors throughout the district, which again is a significant logistics challenge too. So it's definitely being considered quite seriously, but there are a lot of sort of other components of it that have to be figured out in addition to yes or no, should we move forward with it. So I'm not sure that I have a perfectly clear answer for you on where we stand with it at the moment, but that is very much at the top of our conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Next on the list, we have Shelby's iPad. If you want to unmute your microphone, state your name and ask your questions or make comments.
Yeah, hi, my name is Shelby Wood. I have a daughter at Joe Walker Elementary. My question, it's probably some people might think it's silly, but I'm just trying to figure out like kind of the workload to expect this upcoming fall. It was just a question about like, art, music, gym, computer, will those be done at school? Those classes, will those be done at school, or will those be expected to be completed at home? Also, if they're done at school, will those be done like all in the classroom, or will they be going to like the other classrooms to do those classes?
Hi, Shelby. Did Mr. Gottrin get on?
No, go ahead, Mrs. Blake. It's all you, and then I'll jump in if I have anything to add.
Yeah. So after the plan is approved, we will be looking at the schedule, and all of the students, I can speak at the elementary since that's what you're referring to, will have all of those special classes. And it could be a combination of in school and distance learning, but it really depends on that particular course and the classroom environment. If we are able to social distance, the students will go to music class, they'll go to art class. In some instances, we may have, it could be the librarian would go to the classroom to do a lesson. Students may log on to their Chromebook to sign out a book, and that book might be delivered to them. So we're really working out the details as far as the schedule is concerned, but all of the students will be participating in all of those subjects.
Okay, just because with music, they weren't able to figure out, anything for online for music. So that was something that I was kind of curious about also.
Yeah, we will definitely, they will be having music class on online and in school during the blended sessions, and you'll definitely see a change in the fall as opposed to the spring regarding those special classes.
Okay, well, I think you guys are doing a great job. It's a very difficult situation that we're in, and I know you guys it's a very difficult time right now, and there's a lot of different opinions flying around, and honestly, I'm comfortable with the slow start. I was more nervous about like this being like, this is how it's going to be for the whole year. And then when you guys said, no, we're just starting out this way, I was like, oh, okay. I'm glad this isn't going to be how it is for the whole year. So
yeah, well,
that made me feel a lot better.
We definitely appreciate your support, Shelby. Thank you.
Thanks.
One thing to add, since you asked about the music piece of it, that I worked closely with the music teachers, especially at the secondary level. But since I am currently at Joe Walker as well, I know that both Mrs. King, the secondary choir director, and then Mr. Harold, the band director, both of them had some kind of really cool and innovative ways that they were utilizing to help with the distance portion of music instruction. And so I know they work closely together as a music department. So we'll certainly pick their collective expertise and wisdom and make sure that any parts that are distance-based that music instruction is supported, because the music and the arts are such critical parts of the educational process. So I know they both have some really good ideas, and I think they'll be able to help those translate to the elementary level as well.
Thank you for your comments, Shelby. Next on the list, we have Bill Adams. Bill, go ahead and unmute your microphone, and you have the floor.
Okay, first of all, hello everyone, and just echo some other people in that you guys are doing a good job, especially in a tough situation where I think almost no matter what decision you make, a lot of people are not going to be happy. But what I want to say is following up on Mr. Chapman's statement about the synchronous learning. I think that is vitally important to the online component. Both of my kids are probably going to be in an online option of some sort, just because we have a higher risk, especially with respiratory illnesses. But I think the synchronous option is extremely important. There has to be some sort of structure, especially for kids that are both middle school age They're not necessarily going to be self-motivated like, a junior or a senior might be to go and do everything. So I do think that I hope there is a lot of attention paid to that part of it, and that the option comes forward allows for that. I'm sure that not every class will be live and in person, but I think that there has to be a structure set that allows for that.
Thank
Hey,
you
Bill,
for
it's
the
Chris.
feedback, Mr. Adams. I was just saying thank you, Carissa.
I was going to say the same thing. So yes, thank you for encouraging us that is an important component.
Yeah, I think without it, a lot can be lost there, and I'm sure that we're not the only ones that are looking at the online options. So, I do think that is a very, very big part that has to be looked at. If everything is go at your own pace, I'm not sure how well that would work for a lot of kids.
Very true. And on the flip side, I think too, for anyone that's still listening and saying, oh, but we have internet concerns. I mean, we know that we need to find that balance, right? And so we have been able to overcome that with the telephone this year, with recording lessons, and then people can access them later, or once they can even come and use our network here and download the videos. And so we definitely want to have that balance. But yes, we saw much more participation this past spring anytime our students or anytime our faculty were offering the synchronous learning. And all of the research that we have read definitely shows that that's an integral component of good learning. So thank you for stressing that.
Thank you, Bill. Up next on the list, we have Coiler. Coiler, go ahead and unmute your microphone again. You have the floor.
Yes. I wanted to say that actually Mr. Adams made a good point that the younger children are not going to be as aware, and the lower they go in age, obviously with masks and the rest. I mean, you have a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, whatever. To them, it's not going to really matter because they don't see the comprehensive difference of a virus. So I wanted to commend him on understanding that the older children and or students or young adults as students would understand that. I also, kind of wanted to know, is there a plan in place, or is there, somebody seeking out a plan that if we do run into a situation where, we get a large COVID kind of uprise or what have you, and a shutdown, is there a plan so it's not really disturbing too much of parents that have to work? Because I noticed that there were parents on here that were kind of upset and things, and I'm on their side. If they have to work, if they have to be in an office, is there a plan as to what we do with our children? Or is there something in formation, because nobody knows where this virus is going? So is there something in formation to protect all of us, or to help all of us, you, the teachers, the principals, the parents, the students? Is there a directive that the government is trying to help us with, or are we kind of on our own?
I can speak a little bit to that. My name's Amy Todd. I am the interim superintendent. So I have just recently begun. I know that Dr. Collette had been attending all the superintendent meetings, and this past Friday, the superintendents of the Washington, Fayette, and some Allegheny counties met with legislators, and we are asking those same questions. we're asking for the state to provide guidelines and details so that we as districts have regulations to follow and they're clear and concise, because we have a lot of concerns because it's a student can get a fever for when they're losing a tooth. So we need to get some direction from PDE, and we are encouraging our legislators to please help us with Department of Health guidelines and guidelines from the Department of Education, so that when we are talking to our parents, we have what they're requiring us to do. And quite frankly, those guidelines have been changing on a regular basis, and they are not always consistent. So we are encouraging and reaching out to our representatives and our legislators to get that help, just like you are. And as we get the information, we will certainly try to pass it on. I don't know that that answers your question, but I'm trying.
It does help. Oh, by the way, I don't mind saying my first name is Reed, if that helps. Everybody in the whole entire district and everywhere else will know who I am at that point, but because it's a very rare name, but that's okay. My thing is, I believe all of us are human. We're all trying to work very hard at trying to figure this entire thing out. I think it's really a bad situation for the entire world. And I just was inquisitive to see how, we're all working together as a society to try to make this the best thing we can do to fix. And, some of us really get upset thinking that you need to fix it instead of me, when really that's impractical, because we are all in this, as it's a spreading thing that none of us can control. So I just wanted to know if there was just conversation about practical ideas in the future about how it would go forward, or, whether we would have shutdowns consistently through the year. And I understand, I really believe you really don't know the answer to that. And I don't think any of us know, but I would hope you would definitely keep us informed, and we would all work together to help and make this work.
Thank you. And that's one of the reasons we created the Return to School tab on the web. We credit Mr. Wilson for that idea. He created the button for people to push. We will try to continue to put updated plans and have a one spot go to, so that parents can continue to check those boxes off. And as soon as we get information and guidelines and things we can pass on, we will try to populate that onto our website.
I thank you.
This is Mr. H., the principal at the middle school. I just wanted to also speak to your comments, sir. I can say that there is a lot of discussion about how to try to make it as seamless as possible for families, if the changing situation requires, the district to shift. But as you said, the nature of a pandemic is such that, none of us could say definitively, what the coming months, or frankly, as we've seen lately, even the coming weeks, look like. So, our goal is to try to balance some stability, with each portion or with each plan, in relation to the phase that we're in, with the latest guidance from the Department of Health and the Department of Education and the governor's office. So yes, there is attentiveness to trying to, ensure that those transitions and changes do happen as smoothly as possible. But to your point, and, obviously a very good one, that, there is just going to be some of this that is just going to be fluid by nature. There's a reason we're under an emergency declaration. It's just the nature of this. And so the school, I think, will do its best to respond in a way that's, sensitive and mindful of the burden that it's putting on families, while also recognizing that, as a central focal point for the community, especially in a more rural community like McGuffey, then we have a heightened responsibility to also make sure that when the families and students and staff are in the building, that we don't become, the epicenter of an outbreak or something of that nature that has, far-reaching ramifications for the health and careers and whatnot of the community. So, yes, to answer your question, we are talking about how to do that as smoothly as possible, even if we don't have all the answers at this exact moment.
I thank you for your response.
Thank you, Reed. Next on the list, we have an iPhone that has their hand raised. If you want to unmute your microphone and provide your name and ask a question or make a comment. So there's one participant with their hand up. The participant label is iPhone. If you're the iPhone and you have your hand raised, if you would unmute. I'm not sure if you're speaking right now, but we cannot hear you. I do see that your microphone is unmuted. Is there anybody else in the audience at this point that would like to participate? Please use the raise hand function. We'll give you a moment to indicate that you would like to speak. And so it looks like at this point, there are no others that wish to speak. For the participant that's labeled iPhone, unfortunately, we can't hear you. If you would refer to the frequently asked questions and provide your question through email, maybe we can address your concerns in that fashion. And at this point, Mrs. Todd, there are no other participants that wish to speak.
We wanted to thank each and every one of you for spending your evening with us and letting us address your concerns. We hear your concerns. We will take everything that we learned tonight back to the committees tomorrow and the next day and work to see if there's anything we can implement into the plan. Our initial plan is to get this approved for Thursday night so that we can start working on the procedures, because a lot of the questions that you're asking are in reference to the procedures and how this is going to work. That is our next step. Our committees are working endlessly and tirelessly to get this plan in place. We appreciate each and every one of you and each and every staff member and board member and teacher, administrator, everyone who has put time and effort into this plan. We truly appreciate it. We thank you for your participation. And as we get further on, we may need to do more of these types of informative meetings. So please keep checking back. When we do these meetings, we will send out the all call, and we'll make sure that everybody gets the all call, and then the link will be posted on the website the day of the meeting, shortly before the meeting. So again, thank you for spending your evening with us, and continue. If you have questions that frequently asked questions at the end, there is an email link. Feel free to email that link, and we will try to continue to post answers to the frequently asked questions on the website. Thank you.